That's how you can get a hold of me. I do have a blog where I talk about .NET things. I'm also a Kentico MVP, which is a title that a few people in the US have. Kentico is a CMS, a lot like Sitecore, Sitefinity. People have heard of Kentico, maybe. A couple shaking heads. Awesome. Great. I'll put this up at the end as well. So that's how you can get a hold of me. But we're going to talk today about the .NET Core CLI. And the reason I thought that this was going to be a good topic is the fact that tooling has been around the .NET world for a long time. And it's really never been great, right? It's been kind of tough. And that's for a couple different reasons. In the very beginning, as you can see, Visual InterDev. Anyone? Visual InterDev user? Huh? Nice. Me too. Couldn't believe it when it first came out. Better than Front Page, though. Front Page was terrible. Also better than, like, I don't know, it was like Dreamweaver or something else before Front Page. So it was, at its time, pretty awesome. But that's when this whole tooling thing kind of started with the move from Classic to the first version of the .NET framework. We had properties that we had to store about our projects, what kind of things they were. We wanted to collect those up into something more than just the actual code. And, projects was the solution at the time to bring that together. Then as we get a little further, now that we have one project, we might have 3 or 4 projects in a nice enterprise architecture solution. So how are we going to bring that together? Well, we need solution files. We need a way to group those projects together to make sure that when you look at them, they're logical and they're related, and maybe they even are dependent on one another when it comes to a project standpoint. So we have another layer of complication. And then on top of that, as time has went on in the world, I'm fast forwarding quite a bit here, but as time has went on, now we want to be able to develop and run our applications on different platforms. So how in the world do we take the properties and the solutions that rely on some of the really original tooling of the .NET world that may or may not depend on like Windows operating system to actually be there? Thank you, original MS Build. That becomes a challenge when we want to run that on new platforms like Mac or Linux, whatever you want to. And .NET Core, when it was first created about 1.5 or 2 years ago, maybe even 3 now, time moves fast, it wanted to solve some of that. But it also had to remember that we've had .NET around for a long, long time. There's billions of lines of code written around the world. Well, how can we do the first 3 things well in a different platform when we have the old world that we still need to think about? And then lastly, now that we're trying to solve that hard tooling problem with .NET Core, we still have to remember that, again, it's the full framework still exists. We can't just not do that because people are going to use that for years and years and years. So tooling is tough, right? Because the original part of it is mainly based off stuff that's been around for years and years and years. It really hadn't changed that much. What's the solution to that? Well, Microsoft believes it's the .NET Core CLI when it comes to many of the solutions. I wouldn't say it's the silver bullet for everything in the world. You're still going to actually use MS Build for quite a bit of things. But the idea when .NET Core 1 was first released is that we have this really nice and simple project JSON. And it sounded cool, right? Because has anyone actually like looked at like MS Build, the XML junk behind the scenes, 3 billion lines to do one project, not readable, GUIDs all over the place. I mean, disgusting, right? This is beautiful, as much as JSON could be beautiful. We have human readable things. We know that we have basically a web project that's somewhat dependent on IIS. And you can kind of guess that we maybe want to use this framework and we don't want to exclude or include a few files there at the bottom, right? At least you get a sense of what's going on. And it's not black magic voodoo of GUID after GUID. And this was, again, .NET Core 1 first came out. This was the solution. Everyone's going to move to this. The .NET Core team was very happy. It got a lot of momentum off the ground. But then it kind of backfired. I am a CrossFit person, even though the physique doesn't quite look like it. So I just thought that this was a classic way of basically the Microsoft team was really excited about this. So were a lot of developers. And then they launched it to the enterprise. And they were like, no, that's not going to work. We have all this old stuff that we have our pipelines already built. We can't just move everything to project.json because it doesn't have everything, right? So again, that guy, he's going to hurt a lot from that. That's not good. And one more time. Ouch. Yes. Yeah. So Now we fast forward a little bit to .NET Core 2, and the Microsoft team realized that basically we can't just have Project JSON, but could we take some of the ideas that came from Project.json, the simplification of things, the human readability, and could we re-architect our projects and solutions with MS Build 2.0? And that's what they did. They basically went, updated MS Build in the .NET Core world, and they took out a lot of the junk in projects and solutions in MS Build world. You all right, sir? Okay, good. You can see that now we still have a somewhat simple XML structure. It's human readable. There's not GUIDs anywhere in the project references, and we can kind of still read this and get the same value. And the nice thing is item group, property group, that all was still around in MS Build 1 and in the old world. So it wasn't like a giant pain in the butt to move if you had a really long build process in .NET Framework 4.0 to this solution. In fact, you basically went in and you could kind of remove a few things. And there's actually even a way to migrate your old MS Build files and projects and things to this new world. So actually, sorry, I said that wrong. 1.1 is when this was released. It got better into. But this is what we're going to end up working with when we talk about any kind of project in .NET Core. So much, much simpler. So the CLI is the .NET Core's answer to how do I automate some of these things? And it works off three main areas, basically. We have the driver, which is the command that you will type in into your developer tool command prompt or PowerShell, which I'll recommend PowerShell, and that's what we'll be doing today. Then the command of what you want, and then options to that command. So my first question for you guys, and I know it's early, I apologize for that. Don't love being here this early either, but does this remind you of any other syntactical package management tool that you may have in your machines? PowerShell, that's close. I'm doing a little bit more with, go ahead, sir. NPM, yes, thank you very much. This is a lot like NPM, and you'll see as we get into it why that is. And it made sense because, you know, I think Microsoft basically was like, and this is just my opinion, even though I'm in a Microsoft building, they were watching what was going on in the NPM world, and they were like, man, that's kind of nice. Young developers can learn that very quickly because it makes sense. Why don't we get there too? Again, just my opinion. And what the CLI is, at the end of the day, it's a lot of wrapping of the new MS Build process, which is why I talked about it so much. We're going to take a lot of the commands that you would type in into our new CLI tool and actually kind of pass them right into MS Build. That's what a lot of it does, but not all of it. There are other tools in the CLI that have nothing to do with MS Build. There's things like package management with NuGet. There's things like publishing, creating new solutions, things that you can't do just with MS Build, which is why I think we're not having a command that says MS Build new, because even though it does most of the work, they want to be able to do other things. So they added the wrapper around MS Build. It's called the .NET CLI, and it allows us to do some cool things, and we're going to get into those things. But before I do that, I do want to kind of set up a scenario to think through that's a little bit real world, because I didn't want to just stand up here and run command after command after command and not have something to tell as a story, right? So one of those things that we do at my company is build content management system implementations. This is Kentico Cloud. It's a headless CMS. Anyone heard of headless CMS before? Okay, no one. Well, maybe one or two. Basically, it allows you to create your content and then serve it out over an API to any technology you want. I don't care if it's PHP, .NET, Ruby, Python, Java, it doesn't matter. Basically, you're just consuming a REST-based API to get your content that you would define and model right here. And here we're just creating a few images, adding in some content. Again, this think of like powering a website homepage of articles, because that's what we do the most. What that does is basically give you structured content that has an automatic model generator to basically load up like your list of articles that you would put on your homepage, classic website example. And then the cloud system does that with Kentico Cloud. And they provide a nice .NET Core boilerplate for MVC. So if you want to get started, there's a few simple commands, download the .NET Core project, connect up to the API, and you have your website that actually kind of looks like this, which we'll get into in a second. And it just kind of makes it easy to get started as a sample getting started website. So that's what we're going to build today. And at this point, instead of just listening to me, we're actually going to show some of the things. And I'm going to test Fate, because we're going to do all this as a live demo. All right, before I actually start typing, one thing, you probably already have the .NET Core CLI on your machines if you have a recent version of Studio 2017, Studio 2019. But if you don't have it, you can simply get it from Microsoft's website. I didn't actually put a link up because I kind of forgot about that. But it's the .NET Core 2.2 SDK. That's the thing that you would Google to get this if you don't have it. But chances are you already actually have it. Okay? So I'm at PowerShell. And again, you can do all this work at a command prompt if you'd like. You can do it in the VS Code terminal window. Doesn't really matter where. It kind of all works. Got a few extra people coming in. Thank you. But I chose PowerShell because A, it's nice to make the font bigger for a presentation like this. And B, you can actually chain more commands together and do a few more special things in PowerShell that don't work in the command prompt. I'm not an expert on that. I don't know why that is. But basically, I would say best practice, use PowerShell for this stuff. Okay? Okay. All right, so we're going to start with our first command. And if you remember the first slide, our driver is .NET, and our command would be new. And then I'm going to do some options. And there's quite a few options when you do new, right? So I'm going to scroll back up a little bit. And I'm hoping that the size of that text is mostly readable for people in the back. Okay, we're looking good. Thank you. Anytime that you want to figure out what anything does in the .NET Core CLI, -H is your friend. Of course, it's a help command switch or argument, depending on what you call it. And this is saying that, hey, there's a lot of things we can do with .NET New. And one of the first things that you would do in .NET New is you'd have to tell the CLI what you want to create. So the new command lists all the templates that come with the fresh install of .NET Core. And you can actually add more templates if you'd like, but it's telling you, here are all the different things you can do. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a class library. Then we're going to put an API on top of it, that Kentico Cloud MVC boilerplate site. We're going to link it all together, and we're going to do that all from the CLI as opposed to inside of Visual Studio. That's our process today. And again, I'm going to do this live, but I do have a cheat sheet. I wasn't that brave. All right, so what I want to do first is I want to create a new class library. So from that template list, ClassLib is the template that I want to start with. It's basically an empty project with one class. That's where you might start most of your projects these days. And I'm still not sure about what options I have. So I can do a -H, and I can see that this class library template has a few additional options below. For -F, framework, very important. What framework do you want to build on? Sometimes it's assumed, but you might want to start explicitly, and that's what I'm actually going to do. And then some other things like lang version and no restore, if you want to restore the packages or not. We'll get into that later. But basically, if I do .NET New ClassLib, the most important thing to do is when you're creating new architecture, creating new projects and solutions, is worrying about naming, right? My developers back home, I swear to God, if they spend another hour disagreeing about what name to call things, I'm going to fire all of them. It just pisses me off. I'm not a naming guy, okay?
You know this is streaming live.
It is, sorry guys. And you know what? I would tell that to them to their faces as well. Okay? So if you do this with no other switch, it's going to work. You're going to get your first project, right? And if we look at the directory, we've got a project. It's got a class file. You could imagine what that class file looks like. It's pretty simple. Very simple. And it grabbed the name of the project. It grabbed the name of the class, everything from the directory I was running in. So at least it didn't go error. You can't do this at all. It was trying to be somewhat intelligent. And context in the CLI folder structure of where you're at, that's important. It's going to use that to pick up names. It's going to use that to find solution files and project files and references. So just always be aware of where you are in your folder structure when you're doing this. Okay? Now, I don't actually want that because that's not going to work. So I'm going to remove that. And I will try as much as I can to do clear screen so I can get it back up to the top instead of being at the bottom. So I'm going to do what's actually really important, and I'm going to give it an output directory. Just a directory, not a name, because this is kind of cool in my mind. I can actually say Kentico lib, oops, spelled right. And it will create, with that -o switch, the directory and the name all from that one word, instead of just picking the current directory, right? And then on top of that, I'm going to use -f, because I want this to be a .NET Core project. I don't want it to be a target framework of like .NET 4.7, right? So to do that, I'm going to do .NET Core app 2.2, because if you ever look at the project files behind the scenes, when you're in .NET Core, that's the name. And again, that name comes from the help switch if you're not sure what the names are of the frameworks. But I'm going to do that, and it's created it. And now, if I look at where we are, I'm a little bit better, because I have a subdirectory that then contains those things. And it's a little bit better named on the project, right? So we've got the project in the directory. This is pretty traditional. Usually you have a couple folders of your projects if you have a large solution, right? That's what you guys do still, hopefully. Yep, okay, good. And then on top of that, you'll note that if we look at the project, it's got our framework. So pretty cool that we can actually create all that with one switch. And of course, I lost my spot already. All right, so we've created a first project. I'm going to go back to the root. Now, typically, when you have a library project, you're going to want to reuse that in something. So I'm going to create another project with the CLI tool. Again, you got to type it right. .NET new. And I'm not sure which template I want to use. So I'm going to quick look at this. And I actually want to create maybe a web API. So I can look at that middle column for the short name. And I see web API as a template type. Awesome. That's what I want to do. Sorry, I'll bring it back up. Whoa. Thank you, PowerShell. .NET new. Web API. And I'm going to give it an output name of Kentico API. Okay. So again, create a second project. But it's bringing in not just a class file this time. It's bringing in all of the things from the template that are about web API, right? So if we look at that structure, we can see it's got a few other things. We've got controllers. We've got our normal startup, things you would have at the most baseline web API project. It actually stubbed all that in there for me from the templates that come with the system. Okay. So now if we go back, we've got our two projects. Yep, question.
Web API had built into it that's not specified.
Yes, so the question was, did Web API as a template have the .NET Framework built into it? Yes, this one actually does have the .NET Core Framework level target built into the template. Good question. Okay, so pretty easy so far. We've got our class library to start with. We're going to have a Web API wrapper to get to it, and then maybe we want to build an MVC site also so that we can use that library in another project. So we're going to do that next. And to do that, I'm actually going to use not a built-in template. I'm going to use a template that Kentico Cloud has actually provided that I've already pre-installed, and I'll get into installing it later. Basically, you can make your own templates. You don't have to use just the 10 that come from Microsoft. So that's what Kentico has done. And I'm going to do Kentico Cloud MVC. That's the name of the template for the boilerplate. And I'm going to call it Kentico MVC. That one ran really fast. But it's amazing to me how fast that one ran when, nope. Oh, you know what? I screwed something up already. I didn't actually want it to use the output directory. I wanted it to use the... So what happened, even though that ran really fast, it actually created more and more things. Now we have a full MVC site, right? .NET Core MVC site. And notice I have 2 directories deep. I actually didn't want that. So this is kind of the cool thing about like the CLI and just the command line in general. It doesn't hurt, as opposed to, how like in Visual Studio, you're like, oh crap, I made projects. And now I don't want that project. And I got to go right click delete 16 times possibly. Now it's better in the new Visual Studios, but in the old world it sucked, trust me. Here, we can actually just say, I want to just kill that whole thing. right? And it's gone instantly. And awesome, I killed the wrong one. Yeah, no, that actually does not exist. Nice try. That's fine. Again, we're just going to put it right back for Kentico API. And we're going to actually remove the wrong, or the right project this time, hopefully. Yes. Yep. Actually, I'm going to get to autocomplete. So the question was, does it have autocomplete? I'm going to get to that. It's good forecast or foreshadowing. So I'm actually going to then go back to creating my new MVC projects. And here I'm going to show you the difference between -O and -N. So .NET New, Kentico Cloud, MVC. And this time I'm going to use -N. So first pop quiz to everybody. What do you think -N represents compared to -O? All right, it's early. I'll give you a pass. Name. -N means name. That, instead of creating an output directory that the name will be based from, you're going to give it a name in the same directory. So this has to do a little bit with the way the template is set up. The Kentico Cloud template wants to make another directory. I don't want that. So I'm just going to go with Kentico MVC again for the name. And this time, instead of having double directory layers, I have my correct 3 directories. And again, if I change directory into MVC, now I have all my stuff. Right? So I just want to get all those at the right level. Good question? So the question is, if you have multiple versions of .NET Core installed, how does the template know which one to use? So the switch, the help switch, will tell you all the ones you can use that are on your machine. Like I actually have 2.1 and 2.2 installed, but because this template and the last template, they actually already were using .NET. I think this template uses .NET 2.1. It's more about the template. At that case, I do believe you can override it with the -F switch as well, but I didn't have to type .NET Core 2.2 like 10 times. But yes, there's basically ways to control framework levels. Okay. All right. So everybody with me so far? We got 3 projects. Okay. Great. Is there a question? No, name is spelled right, actually, I think. Because otherwise we wouldn't have any of the files in the directory. It would have said, I can't find the template if I spelled it wrong. Okay, so as you can imagine, these 3 projects are just projects, right? But what if we want to do other things like, I don't know, make them a solution or bring in NuGet packages? .NET Core CLI can do that too. And we're going to do that really quickly. All right. So the first thing you'd use instead of new, because now in this scenario, I want to maybe bring in like a NuGet package, because that's something that'd be very common at this point. The .NET add command is your friend for that. So 2 ways to add things into an existing project. We can add a NuGet package, or we can add a reference to a project, and I'll get to that in a second. First thing we're going to do is add in a package. And so remember, we're at the level where there's no project files in our directory. So if I did .NET add, I actually have to tell it that, I actually want to target the library project. And the way I would do that is always by specifying the CS proj path. That's like, if we ever want to modify something, like add a package into something, we really have to work with the CS proj file, because that's what we're doing. Remember at the back of the beginning, we're adding into the XML all those packages the same way you would if you were in Visual Studio. So I'm going to add a package into that. And, probably Newtonsoft is the most common NuGet package in the world, I would assume at this point. And I can do that simply by typing the package name. And what that's going to do is going to automate the idea or the task of bringing in the package and adding it as a project reference. So if we look at that and we cat out the library project, you can see we have a reference. And it's a simple reference. Sorry, it's kind of at the bottom. It's version 12. The cool thing was it figured out the right version to use based off your project type. And that's why the CS project file is so important. It didn't grab me Newtonsoft for .NET Full Framework. It grabbed me Newtonsoft for .NET Core. Pretty neat. Yes. Yep. And what's actually more impressive than that is the fact that I can't remember packages to save my life, right? If you do one other step, which I'll get to in a second, you can actually basically tab complete through NuGet packages, right? This is something that people have probably wanted for a long time, and you can imagine there's a crap ton of them. But if you want to do something a little bit more targeted, we could actually get to Microsoft Graph.core or something like that. We could add that in. We don't have to remember how to spell it. So the question is, does it accept wildcards on that? I don't think it does. It's really finicky. This is actually, what you're doing here is you're enabling a PowerShell script to pass the command to the .NET driver, and then it does the lookup, and it's basically really finicky is probably my best answer to that. But again, if I want to do that, I can do that, and I can add that package right into there.
Quick round of applause for Steve. Air conditioning.
Thank you. Okay, all right. So we added some packages to some we added some packages to some projects. Pretty cool. It's something that you would probably do typically. But what's more important maybe is now let's pull this together, right? We have these three separate things. We've got some things in there, but we have to be able to use it in a real solution. So I'm going to move to basically how do we put those things together in a solution that are dependent on one another, because that's what you would do in this scenario. All right, so I have another pop quiz. Do you guys think that if we want to create a solution, we'd use the add command? No, we actually wouldn't. That threw me off quite a bit because everything else was always new or add that I was doing at the beginning of all this learning. And there's actually a specific command just for solution. I know, it's like the only one that's special. It's all by itself, SLN. And right. It's completely kind of contradictory to some other things. 3 commands that come with solution. We can add, list, or remove. Pretty common stuff. So what I'm going to do is actually .NET solution add, and we want to add a solution to basically to the first project. I'm going to bring that first project in. And actually, am I doing this right? No. So that's how we add projects to a solution. Oh, it's PowerShell. We actually want to use the new solution first. And this is where the solution stuff seems to get a little confusing compared to the rest of it. So if we look at this, here's how you would create your first empty solution file. You have to actually use .NET New for that. So I'm going to do that, and I actually just want to call it Kentico. I want this to be at the top level of my 3 folders, so I don't want an output folder, but I do want to control the name. So I'm going to do that, and then you can see that we now have a solution file there, and very simple. Ooh, brings back memories of old MS Build world though. Like there is still some fun things in there that I don't quite know what everything is, but that's okay. It's still it's simple. It's not too bad. So again, I'll just recap where we're at. Recap where we're at. We've got the projects. We've got a solution that's empty. Now we need to bring the projects into the solution, and that is where you would use .NET Solution Add. You'd specify your first project to the project file. Remember, the project file is important. And basically, that's it. So now, if we look at that solution, nope. Sorry, I've typed .NET probably a billion times in the last 3 weeks. We have, that project that's in there. It's at the top. It does have a GUID. I've heard that newer releases of like .NET Core 3, I think they're actually going to fix the solution files to have less GUID dependencies. Because at the end of the day, the name and the path is what matters. Like, that's what they decided with the projects. The GUIDs, they literally don't matter if we have the paths and the names. Okay, so I'm going to do that same thing to not just the library. I'm going to do that to our API. And then I'm going to do that same thing to the MVC solution. Okay, so to prove this all worked, I'm going to load up Visual Studio. And fingers crossed, when we open up that solution, everything should be cool. And I'm actually just going to make sure it's the new solution. Open a project solution. And anyone got Visual Studio 2019? And it came out like 2 weeks ago. Yep. Reviews are good so far. I think it's kind of nice, kind of fast. So good that our solution is there. Bring that up. Still a little delay. This is a Surface. I mean, it's not the most powerful machine in the world. However, it's pretty good. And we have projects. And things look good, right? So basically, we just proved everything we did. Thank you. Thank you. This isn't the cool part yet, so hold your applause to the end. We've just proven that it's worked, right? And we have our normal stuff. Okay? All right, so even though we have our projects and our solution and things look right, what's missing? Another quiz for the crowd. What is missing to actually make this like a real thing? Think of how would you maybe reuse things in other projects if... Okay, you have to add them as a reference, right? Not quite a start file. We want to make sure they're dependencies, right? We want to make sure the API project, the MVC project depends on our library. So we want to add a reference, okay? And here's where they've actually improved, like Visual Studio 2019, actually 2017 and 2019. And if you notice in dependencies, it's got the couple that are built in. It's got the one NuGet. So actually, just to verify, remember when we added those two libraries at the beginning? There they are, right? Just to prove that they're there. And I'm going to actually leave this open, and we're going to switch back. And we're going to add a project reference through a CLI command to the solutions and the projects. So I'm going to use .NET add for that. Remember, if we're not sure, we can always do -h. So before we did .NET add package to bring in NuGet. Now we're going to do .NET add reference to bring in a project reference to a project. So, and again, this is why I said context is important, because it kind of works best if you're in the directory of where you want to add the reference to. It's less typing. So I'm going to switch to the actual API project, just to be in the right context, right? We're in there, so it can find the CS project in the current directory. And I'm going to call .NET add reference. And notice how I could tab complete the word reference, because that is a valid .NET CLI command. And I'm going to actually do that to the Kentico lib project. All right. Now, remember, I didn't touch Visual Studio running the whole time behind the scenes. No crazy big alert in the middle of the screen. It's not asking me to reload my solution. Visual Studio 2013, 2015 would have. But the cool thing is, now if we open up the API dependencies, we have project reference. It just works. It auto refreshes in the background. You don't have to like reload things. Kind of cool. Microsoft did a great job there. All right. So I'm gonna do the rest of those things too. Actually, I'm gonna do the rest of the references to the MVC project. Man, that's loud. That's crazy. Okay. So now here I can just do up command because I want to add the same exact reference. Just want to make both front-end projects dependent on the API or the lib project. Okay, so we did that. And once again, come in here, and we've got our project reference. So pretty cool. Okay. And so, make sure I didn't forget anything. Okay. All right. One other thing that you might do at this point, if you're a test guy, is make a test project, right? To be able to do some test-driven development. So I'm going to create a new project. And guess what? There's a template for all the test suites you can imagine. So if we do the -h, you can see that there is actually NUnit, multiple versions. There's MS test, there's XUnit. What's your guys' favorite test framework? XUnit? I've just always kind of done MS test, so that's kind of me, but just, you know, is XUnit that much better in the opinion of the crowd?
Similar.
Similar? Okay, similar to other frameworks. All right, great. Yeah. Yeah, the newest platform is pretty good. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to go with just because I know a little bit better. So anyways, I'm going to do .NET New MS Test, and I'm going to give it a name because this is just like the other projects. We want it to make sense. So I'm going to call it Kentico Test. It's going to bring that in, and then I'm going to bring it into the solution, which is .NET, and I shall bring it back up to the top. .NET solution add to Kentico Test. There it is. And I should also add a reference. Directory to Kentico Test. Add reference. Complete to the library. So we have, again, the same sort of dependencies. Oh yeah, gotta go out of directory. And there we have. Okay, so now this time I am gonna get the reload, right? Because I added a brand new project, it's gotta do that at least once. Okay, and just to prove that we are all good, I'm actually gonna run it. Funny thing is, I don't actually have to run it in Visual Studio. That's going to be our next segment where we can actually run things at the CLI. But I just want to actually show that what we've done so far actually brings up a working website. And as long as the Wi-Fi gods are with me, a website should show up any second now at this port. If there it is. Okay. So this is the MVC boilerplate for Kentico Cloud. That article came from the API that Kentico Cloud gives us in the headless CMS. And we have a very, very simple working website, right? Pretty cool from basically automation. So, one thing about tab completion, because I mentioned it a couple times, it doesn't work just immediately. You actually have to follow these instructions. I'm not going to go through all that. Basically, you have to allow your PowerShell instance to run the script execution policy of being able to run a script. And then here, and remember, the slides will be posted after the talks, so don't worry too much if you don't have it. The code to run the auto-completion stuff in PowerShell, it's all there. So it took me like 5 minutes once I read the link. So takeaways for this first part. We now have 3 different ways that we can do pretty much anything when it comes to building new projects in the Microsoft world. We can do it in Visual Studio. We've been doing that for years. But now, with the improvements of .NET Core, we can write those files manually if we want to, right? Remember that one original project file? It had just one package reference and like 2 XML notes, like it was 4 lines. So if you want to write it manually, that's the second way you can do it. And then of course, if you want to automate it with the .NET Core CLI, that's the third way. That's the way, if you're a big DevOps guy, any DevOps engineers in the room? Okay, a couple. That's going to be a solution. So I think that's pretty cool. Like, we didn't have this capability before, and honestly, just as good, maybe better than NPM. Sorry, Node people and front-end people. By the way, I don't do front-end development. If there's a new JavaScript framework that comes out tomorrow, I literally don't care. Don't care. Okay, now let's do some build, run, and publish things with the CLI. So again, we ran the project in Visual Studio. Oops. But we don't have to. There's a set of commands where you can actually do just about anything. And now this is like more important for your like release pipeline. So if you're using Azure DevOps and you want to have pipeline steps and stages, all these commands, you can do things like restore all the packages for the solution, build the projects, publish the projects, test the projects. It's all there in the .NET Core CLI. It's pretty cool. Okay. So one of the first things that you might want to do if you're setting up your first pipeline is do a restore, right? And I did that wrong because I don't need that dash, just one dash. So restore has a ton of options. We have different levels of things, different ways to do it with specific versions, verbosity, I don't know, verbosity of the NuGet package resource. But basically, if I do a .NET restore at the top level, it's going to do all of the packages in the solution. And we didn't have that many. We only had a couple, so it went pretty fast. gives us some nice logging information. But if you are someone who has a complex project and the build process is failing and you get things like errors, like why the hell is it failing? There is a way to do some craziness and actually get more information than you could ever want in your life. I mean, look at this thing. That's actually what Restore is doing. It's doing all of that stuff behind the scenes, checking numbers, references, dependencies, all sorts of crap, right? I don't even know what that is right there. But there we go. It did finish. Same, it went a lot longer, but it gives you like every level of information you could ever want as someone who's trying to debug why your pipeline isn't working. It's amazing what NuGet does behind the scenes, right? We think it's so easy. Oh, just add a new thing and it kind of brings it in. Guys, in the old world, do you know how hard it was to do things before NuGet? It was ridiculous. I'm just super annoyed that the kids these days have it so easy with NuGet. So you can restore it at a solution level. You can restore it at a project level. Either one's fine. But basically, what's a little bit more interesting is .NET Build. So it does the same thing that you would do with Build inside of Studio. Exact same thing. And what's important, that's an improvement in the latest version of the tooling. Originally, anytime that you wanted to do a build or a publish, you had to call restore manually every time. Now the tooling is aware of anytime it thinks it needs a restore, it just does it for you behind the scenes. So really, you could forget about restore unless you're doing that like debugging step, and you can call build for all of your projects, and it won't. See how it did the restore even though I called build, and it's actually then building the projects, spitting them out, and it's putting them into a very specific spot in the bin directory. Right? We actually have this concept of now, because we can multi-target frameworks between .NET Framework 4.7 and .NET Core 2.1 and 2.2, it's doing the level of .NET Core App 2.2 in the debug path. Because you could actually build this to a different framework if you wanted to, and it would put it in a different path. So I think that's a nice improvement as well in the .NET Core world. Okay. You know, if you have something with, maybe you have a nice developer who's a little green, and they've committed everything into source control in your Git repo for the whole project, including all the binaries, and you pull it down and then things are missing because the git ignore file was wrong. Real world experience here, that's happened to me many times. There's also a way to like clean all these directories out, right? So same thing that you do in Studio, there's .NET Clean. And it's gonna go through and it's gonna remove all the stuff in those bin directories. Now that's a good way to recover when someone doesn't know what in the world they're doing with source control. Sorry. Client flashbacks. It's just too many. Okay. All right. So just to prove that did what it did, I'm going to go into a bin directory, and you can see that we have the folder still there. Wow, that's annoying. But they're all empty, right? Just to prove that they're empty. So that clean did work. It's not that exciting, but it's a good value tool to have. Okay. All right, now, important when you start building and running things. So if I go back to the beginning and say I want to run and build the MVC site. Oh, there's a question.
So previous versions,
yep.
Supposed to be a package folder there with all the different out there, the folder out there.
Right. So the question is, why is there not a package folder in the different places in the old world there always was? Well, basically what this is saying is it's a live reference out to NuGet every time. Now you still can create a packages folder in there and it would grab it locally. But this one's just saying always go out to NuGet live. Good question. Okay, so I'm going to actually build and run the MVC site. I didn't actually have to specify the project file. I forgot. But so building it actually creates the DLLs that run the app in the right place, right? And building it did it in the debug configuration. And now that we have that, we actually can run it. And actually, I believe I don't even have to specify. Yeah, so I have to specify something to tell it to run. So I'm actually going to say .NET run. Oh, not runtime. Could not find a project. See, this is why I have my cheat sheet. I'm doing something wrong. So I need to have -p to tell it that I want to run a project. So there is a little hidden fun with the switches that you need to get used to with all the arguments. But basically, I'm now running from local a self-contained, self-hosted .NET Core MVC website. I'm not using IIS or IIS Express. So if I do a new browser, not to my email, that would not be good. Same thing. Now we're running completely locally from that run command, and you can see that the self-hosted .NET Core web server is kind of responding to some of the requests, and it's giving you a little bit of debug information, but it's still running, right? And it's running the debug part of it. Okay. There's another way that, as opposed to specifying the project file, where it maybe has to do some extra work to figure out what to do, you can actually tell .NET to run the exact DLL. You don't have to specify the project file. And that's interesting. You think that would be .NET run, right? It's not. It's just .NET by itself, which has never made a ton of sense to me. Why everything else in this entire thing has all the other commands, but this one doesn't. But you know, hey, I guess that makes sense to Microsoft. So in that case, I can actually specify right to the exact DLL. And it errored because my code base is actually looking for things in the startup directory from the startup process, things like launch settings, app settings, configs. So I forgot that actually you can't run it right from, can't run it right from the root. We actually have to be in the directory where the build process took the files and moved them right into the step. So if I'll just make that a little bit clearer. If we show the MVC project, see in here we have XML files for our rewrites. We have some configs. That stuff needs to be there if you actually want to run. This is specific to my MVC project. Not all projects would have that. But now I can actually just say, give me the DLL. And it's a simple site. So the value of doing it this way is that it's going to do it faster because it's already working off the compiled thing. It's not going to try to compile it when you specify the project file. That's the difference. Does that make sense to everybody?
So it's like a website DLL, like with regular out of DLL.
Yeah, if you want to do console exe DLL, you could. Yep. So the question was, does it have to be just a web thing? No, it doesn't. It can be pretty much anything that is runnable in the .NET world. All right. So that's running the DLLs. Now, this is great if you're kind of running locally, you're testing out some things, you're just doing your local development, but not so good if you actually want to do it for real to push it to, like, I don't know, an Azure App Service. Shameless plug, I'm talking about Azure App Services at noon. Expect you guys all to be at that session too. Thank you. And but you can also you can basically say that, you know what, I don't want to run the debug configuration. You can actually specify release, and you can actually publish this via publish profiling or publish profiles. That's all possible in this tool as well, and that should make the DevOps people in the room pretty happy, right? So just to quick show off a little bit of that. There is a, as well as .NET Run, there's .NET Publish. So you could take, let me make sure I do this the right way. Well, you could look for your help. Mainly it's the C-C is where you would actually say, I want to publish the release configuration of this. You could also do that with running. And then basically here's where we go back to the beginning of the talk, where the CLI is a big wrapper to MS Build. So the minute you get into publishing profiles and just transforms, that really is a direct handoff to MS Build. So we're going to have even a little bit weirder syntax to do that, we're going to use /p instead of dash because we're taking the command that runs from .NET Core publish to MS Build. And I'll just quick show that. So, yes. Question? Sorry, what was it? Oh, so the question was, will publishing take a shared folder path, UNC path? I think it will take UNC. I have not actually tried that, but my gut says yes. But you definitely could try it. I think it will work. So back to publishing. I'm going to do .NET publish -C for release. And I'm actually going to give it the project file this time. So this publish ran. Notice it's not in bin debug anymore. It's in bin release. Makes sense. This is optimized for production, optimized for the real world. Don't ever publish your debug solutions. And then I could do the same thing like .NET and actually well, change into the bin release net. And then I could actually run the published stuff, which would be the DLL. And you know, I mean, so I kind of do wish it would actually put right at the bottom how many milliseconds it took to do this, because this is going to be the fastest one that runs. Because now we're not debugging and we're not running it in debug mode. It's optimized for release. So that would be the fastest way. And again, you could just hit the website and it would come right up. Now, if we did want to not publish this to our local file system, and we want to push it to like an Azure App Service, it's close to the same command. Let me go back to out a little bit. It is close to the same command, but here you would actually do the weird syntax of /p, and you would do publish profile equals your name. And then you'd also have to do the /p :password equals the password to your thing. I'm not actually going to do it because I don't have publishing profile set up. But just in the real world, you probably will have a publishing profile set up, right? And you can leverage that because it still works with this publish command. So this is going to error like crazy. The first part, well, actually, I'm surprised that worked. Oh, maybe it just silently works. I don't know. Yeah, super. I mean, it probably just ignored it at the end of the day. It just stopped. It didn't even try it because that's not a valid command. Yeah, no, I screwed that up. Yeah, that's not right. I did it on purpose because I wasn't even going to run it. But it's funny enough, the first part of publish worked. It built the site, but probably by the time it passed it to MS Build's like, I don't know what the hell this is, and just stopped. Yeah, didn't actually do it. Okay, so that's publishing and running. So just takeaways from this section. Obviously, if you have ADO pipeline, this is just great stuff to use for that, right? It's fantastic compared to what it used to be. Anytime that you can automate things, that's what you should do, in my opinion. And it should reduce error and save some time for you. So that would be the takeaways of using the CLI with build, run, publish, right? All that stuff's pretty cool. So what do you guys think so far? I mean, we're mostly through part of it. There's a pretty cool set of tooling. Yeah, some thumbs up in the crowd. Cool. Question? So the question is, if we want to use VS Code instead of Visual Studio, any restrictions? No, there's none. It works exactly the same. The cool thing is you can use code. I was actually going to do it in code for the whole demo, but I'm a little afraid of doing that. I'm more used to Visual Studio myself, but yes, you can do it. Another question?
You keep like one of those like scripted out snippets of template for the project?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. That would be like a PowerShell script that you say about, or I mean, almost any kind of script where you can execute commands. Right, right. And sorry, the question was, if you had a script, could you script out and save that script later and execute the script? The answer is yes. Even if you have your own NuGets, your own private NuGet sources that you want to pull in, you can basically automate all of it in a bash script or whatever.
Like, can you add it to the UI though for like other people to click on? Like, is there any way to like make it back into the Studio like, project UI?
So follow-up question was, is there any way to add it into the UI into Visual Studio? I think you'd have to create your own Visual Studio extension to call it. I'm not sure, but you should probably be able to do that. I've never personally done that. Question in the back. Yeah, that would be, so the question was, is it feasible to write a script that would publish to a GoDaddy website? And my answer would be, as long as that GoDaddy website can handle FTP deployment mechanisms, a published profile in Studio can save all that FTP information, and then you're executing the published profile from the .NET Core CLI publish command, FTP up to GoDaddy, and you're good. Sorry, I see me afterwards. I'll answer it as best I can. Yep. 2 questions. Okay, go ahead. Right. Yeah. So the question was, is there any way to build your project in Visual Studio and then reverse engineer things to understand it in the CLI world? Yes. Going back to the first takeaway screen, 3 ways to do everything, and it doesn't matter which one you start with. Manually edit, Visual Studio, CLI. It's all completely the same files, same CS proj, same solution. So you can do all of it. Oh. Okay.
Like saving a sequence.
Yes. Yep. Like build commands that you want to add or that are part of your build. Yeah, you could actually look at the logs in Visual Studio, which at the end of the day, it's actually creating MS build commands. You could grab that and bring it in because all the commands that you can pass to MS build, you can do in the CLI. One more question.
I just wanted to comment that Microsoft is coming up with PowerShell 7.
Okay.
And it is adding a lot of new features, but you're seeing a lot of interest in PowerShell in the cross-platform, especially in Windows.
Okay.
Because it is so good at it's an alternative to Bash.
Got it. Thanks. New version of PowerShell is coming out soon for.
Part of the reason is why it's very common to use PowerShell for things like that.
Yes.
So if
Yep.
you're in Azure,
ARM
if
templates.
you're using Azure for hosting and you're in a Linux development environment, it would make sense to use PowerShell to build everything.
Right. Yeah, that's where ARM templates come in to automate Azure stuff. It'd be awesome to do that in Linux. Okay. So one other thing I think that is pretty cool is that, remember we originally created a test project. Anything that you can do in Test Explorer in Studio, you can actually do now in the CLI. So you can run your .NET test command all day from here. And this probably is a little bit more beneficial for those people in the VS Code world, right? You could run your tests from the terminal in VS Code. I don't know, does it, again, I'm not a VS Code guy myself, but is there a Test Explorer in VS Code? Okay, all right. Yeah, probably commandlet. Oh yeah, on the left side there, maybe that. Yeah, next to like source control, there's like maybe a test one. Okay. Okay, so this probably is going to search the solution directories to see if it can find a test project, and it found one, right? And it ran that test. Pretty cool. We didn't have to actually like specify a ton of parameters, just .NET test, and it found the right test project. It found the right test, and it ran that test. Just to prove that this kind of really works, what I want to do is go into the test project and cert fail. We ain't found. Okay. Maybe. All right. So from here, I'll run my tests. It's going to do the same thing, right? It's going to run the tests, hopefully, if I did it right. And it should say one should fail. There we go. Run test finished. One run. And if I look at Test Explorer, a lot of red. We've got our failure. Again, if I do that same thing again through the CLI, it should be the same thing. We should have our nice message. There it is. Didn't work. Test did not work. Clearly. Okay. I'm going to comment that out. So, as I said, when I create a test project, it doesn't have to be MS Test. You can use XUnit, NUnit, whatever testing framework your heart desires. Go for it. Now, there is another testing component to the CLI, and it's called VS Test. This is not quite a test framework. I mean, it's close, but I'd like to think of it as another tool. And this one is a little different because this is basically saying, I'm not going to look at the source code in the test project itself. I'm going to look for any tests that are in a compiled DLL. So it's more like a testing console command, if you will. So I can run the, if you look, the usage is vstest.console.exe, and you really need to pass it a DLL, basically. So even though I did just comment that out, that's fine. I should have left it there for a second. The difference with this command is that you can tell it to look at the final project, which would be in our bin debug, NET Core app, and it would be our Kentico test DLL. So kind of the same thing. Oh, good, I didn't rebuild, so it's still there. Kind of the same thing, but this is probably a little bit more useful when you maybe don't want to work with the raw source. This is probably a little bit faster in the pipeline world. So you could run the command against the compiled output. Maybe you don't have access to the source, but you still want to run the tests. That's why it's a little different. Is that making sense for everybody? The tests, the two ways to do tests? Okay. All right, so basically, takeaways, tests can be automated. Yay. It's not, I mean, there's nothing much there. And we have anything that we do in the studio, we can do in the CLI. Okay, so now I want to get into a little bit of switching gears back to the big scenario. There are ways to add and extend the .NET Core CLI tooling to do other things that Microsoft didn't give you. You can create your own commands and tools. And that's one thing that Kentico has done. They've actually created a tooling set that take the models from the headless CMS, things like article detail that has our title and open graph image, and look at the metadata from the API that it provides and create structured C# class files that are our models. So I don't have to actually like hand type in if I make an article in my content management system that has 3 fields. I don't have to go to my C# code and say, oh, new class, type the 3 fields as a POCO and hit save. Kentico has created a way to do that, and that's called the Cloud Model Generator. So originally we showed the Cloud Boilerplate, which is the .NET Core MVC app. This is an example of creating a .NET Core global tool that you can use in your projects. And it's just an example of extensibility of the CLI. All right, so let's see what that can do. And again, the main thing I'm trying to point out here is that this thing is extendable, and you can actually add and do your other commands that you want to, maybe for your own organization. So if I do .NET tool list, and I did it wrong because you have to have .NET tool list global, I have one tool already installed, but this would show you any of your global tools. Does this remind anyone of anything in the other world of package management? NPM global versus NPM specific to one project directory, right? That's where Microsoft's going. They want to make this similar, in my opinion. But basically, I'm not going to go through the install because that's just an install command. But once that's there, I actually have to type it. Cloud Model Generator exe-h. It's like the same setup, but yet you don't have to worry about writing code that like parses command line switches that you might have had to if you want to start building your own console exe tool. you're piggybacking and leveraging some of the stuff that the .NET Core CLI team already did to be able to handle things like worrying about -H to print out this help statement. And the Kentico team has made a couple switches. So basically, to use this for real, I need my project ID from Kentico Cloud. And this is similar to like any headless CMS or any other API. It doesn't even have to be a CMS, but you think of any API that you use, you basically have to prove who you are. So I'm going to just quick grab that because I don't want to type a GUID because that would be no fun. So here's the sample projects. Go to my API keys. And there's a couple different features that Kentico has, but project ID is the main one that we need. So copied that. Paste that here. So I'm saying from the CLI tooling, here's my project. I actually want to do a type provider. I'm going to skip that for now. And then I really want to do an output directory. Again, -O, that comes from the tooling of the CLI. You don't have to write this. That's already there. So I actually want to I'm just going to put it in models. Because this is like you're going to regenerate this many times throughout your project as you add more models and more content into your website. Probably should have called it Kentico models. I think that's what I was supposed to do, but that's all right. So what that did is it went through and it generated this C# from what we saw on the screen, right? We've got a basic POCO class, nothing fancy, but it's nice to be able to do other things, right? You can extend the .NET Core CLI to do, I mean, like the scenario earlier about maybe can I have my own custom scripting or whatever. You could create your own tool, basically, if you want to. So that was cool. Okay. Now on top of that, there's one more kind of cool tooling thing, and that is basically .NET Watch. Okay. So .NET Watch, anyone want to take a swing at what this might do? Right. So basically, it's watching the file system, and if certain things change, you can do things like, I don't know, run your project again. So how many people, when they develop on MVC or MVC Core, love the fact that if I want to change something quick in a view, I can just change that view file, hit save, and reload the website. I don't have to rebuild or anything. It just works, right? With Watch, you can chain run on top of it. So that way, anytime you change a CS class file, behind the scenes file, it's going to say, oh, something changed in the directory. Rebuild the project for me, run the project, and basically in like 3 or 4 seconds, you can just hit refresh on your web browser. So I'm going to show that because I think that's kind of cool. All right, so .NET Watch. Oh, you know what? I actually probably have to be in the... Yeah, sorry. I'm used to just slamming on the keyboard. I'm going to quick change into Kentico MVC. Debug, .NET Core 2, and .NET Watch run to our DLL. Sorry, I might need a -P. I'll do it that way, I guess. And the project file is going to be a little bit out. Oh, sorry. It's interesting. But I think I screwed it up. .NET Watch. Wow. Run. And then I need a -P. This is good. So we're watching the directory. And we chained it to run. So now the website's running, right? So if I go back up to here and I hit localhost, site came up. That's good. Now I'm going to use Studio. And I'm going to go into the MVC site. I'm going to change something on the controller. So that's how I'm getting my 3 articles from Kentico Cloud and putting it into the index. You know what? I'm just going to whatever. I'm going to do a debug. It doesn't really matter what I do here. I'm just going to save it. And if you watch, I'm saving it really quick. Did I screw that up? Man, I'm running out of typing. Yeah, that would do that. Meant to do that. That was a test for all you. Yep. Okay. So actually, that's kind of cool because I made 2 edits and we can see the history that it's first time it was like, oh, something changed. Error, build. Nope, this can't happen. So I went back, I saved it again, build, and now it worked. Right? So in theory, you could have this running in one monitor, Visual Studio in your middle monitor, and in your third monitor, you'd have the website running because we all have 3 monitors at my office. I could refresh. That was the what did it run at? Look, it was 5,000. Yeah. Look, it was 5,000. Yeah, I got that. All right. Well, in theory, that was supposed to be the icing on the cake. That actually, you can live edit your code. It's refreshing and building for you, and you can just refresh the browser, and then it works. Never fails. So, all right. And in the essence of time, I'm going to go a little faster. We might skip some things. But basically, again, you can extend .NET Core CLI. Here's a site that actually has like 20 different CLI package tools that you can add. Some of them are pretty cool, like generate stuff for TypeScript. Again, I hate front-end development, so I don't care. But you can build your own. And in my opinion, I think this starts to make the .NET Core CLI better than NPM, as I've said. Yes. Yep. C#. There's a whole NuGet repository that you can clone and start from that as a template. It's all there. So there is a ton of NuGet package support, as we've kind of briefly already talked about. However, you can actually create NuGet packages with the CLI. So you would use .NET Pack to do that. All you do would pass your project file to it, and it would make NuGets for you right out of your library. I'm going to skip that because I think we're starting to run out of time. But I think that's cool. Not only can you pack the NuGets right from your class lib with one command, you can actually publish them from the CLI up to NuGet.org. As long as you have your key that identifies who you are in that command, it will publish the stuff up to NuGet for you. So your pipeline could actually update your own posted repos. Pretty cool. So there you have it. I mean, those are the 3 main containers of what you can do with .NET Core CLI. We can manage projects and solutions, as you've seen. We can build, test, run, and publish. And then we can extend and do some other fun things with making your own commands and do all sorts of fun things there. So in summary, .NET Core CLI basically is a must if you're a .NET developer these days, especially if you're in DevOps. I would automate as much as possible with your projects if you can. And forget you ever heard about project.json. Just forget it, okay? Also, Kentico Cloud is great for headless CMS and .NET Core. If you've never seen it, I recommend using it because that's what we do at my company. With that, what other questions do you guys have? Question in the front. So the question is, if you build a console app, would you still use .NET Run? Yes. Yes, you can. Yep, you can run the exe. Yep. Or you could just type the exe. I guess, I don't know if you need to run it. I would probably just type the exe, honestly.
If you want to add some more questions,
oh, okay. Another question. Let's do it after the session.
okay.
I'll show you after the session, I think, because there might be less there isn't, actually. Okay, all right. So I would say thank you.